me to speak in English or both? Hindi and English or?
Both.
Huh? Both. Composite language. English. Okay. And thank you very much for inviting me here. I'm very happy to be amongst students. I hope you're as happy as I am. After dinner to come and sit and listen to a lecture. I'm not sure that's your idea of a good time. You'd rather be out 24/7. That is if you're allowed to be there. What's the timing now? 11. Okay. Nothing is open after 11?
Ganga.
All night?
Till 3.
Till 3. Okay. Well, as you know, today is the birth anniversary of... can you all hear me clearly? Yes. Okay. Today is the birth anniversary of Jawaharlal Nehru. He was born in 1889, and this is the 129th anniversary. Next year it will be 130. And that is why I guess we are meeting here today to recall some of the contributions that were made by him. I think it's entirely appropriate that a university that is named after him, we should at least make some effort to talk about him on his birth anniversary. I don't know if you people are aware, I guess some of you are at least older students who would remember that there was always a Jawaharlal Nehru lecture which was organized by JNU around the date of his birthday. It was not necessarily on the 14th, it could be 18th, it could be 12th, but somewhere in that week, it used to be the most important annual event of the university. It was a university function, and usually very renowned scholars would be invited to come and deliver the Jawaharlal Nehru lecture. And now, as you know, there's nothing. But I don't know if you people have good memories or not, but about a month and a half ago, you might remember a big hoarding at this tea point near 24/7, which advertised a Jawaharlal Nehru lecture. Any of you remember? No. And who was it given by? That's right. And do you remember the most appropriate person to talk about Nehru, you know? Scientific temper and all that, you know? And do you recall the date on which that lecture was held? Do you recall the date by any chance? Jog your memories.
25th of September.
Yes, that's right. And whose birthday is that? Yeah. See, you're all well trained. Now, can you imagine a situation in which the Jawaharlal Nehru lecture, the annual lecture which is always held in association with his birthday, is shifted to 1.5 months or a little more ahead, so with no connection to anything to do with Nehru, except the name. And then it is organized and it is delivered by somebody who has absolutely no connection with anything that Nehru stood for. This is not a discussion of whether he has anything valid to say or not. That's a different story. But it's certainly no connection with anything that Jawaharlal Nehru stood for. So this is a good example of how, I can give you many more examples, how the Nehru legacy is being willfully denied and in fact destroyed, distorted. If you look at the internet, I think the one national leader about whom the grossest kind of distortions and most vicious kind of stories spread. Beginning from his parentage, he is declared to be the son of a prostitute, he is declared to be a Muslim, which is only one step less than the previous description. It goes on and on. I mean, complete fabrications are there. He's supposed to have been somebody who led a very lavish lifestyle, and he was a womanizer, he was a debauch, he was this, he was that, and you could just go on and on looking at all that's there on the net about Jawaharlal Nehru. And we as historians wonder, what have we been doing all these years? I really feel so pointless and worthless that all these years, so many people have spent, my very senior and respected colleague, Professor S. Gopal, who was the founder of the Center for Historical Studies. He was the first professor, a son of S. Radhakrishnan, who wrote this 3-volume biography of Jawaharlal Nehru, which is a classic. Not only that, he also initiated and edited, till he died, the selected works of Jawaharlal Nehru, which run into 25 plus 60. I think they already run into about 85 volumes, and they're still not over. And all this was at the time that JNU was founded. When I joined JNU in 72, Gopal was in the middle of writing the biography, and we used to discuss. He would hand out his drafts, and there used to be animated discussions on his approach to Nehru and all that. So here, that was one really wonders where all that went, if what you now have is either distortions or a complete absence. The Rajasthan official, the school textbook, the SCRT textbook brought out by the Rajasthan government, has removed all mention of Jawaharlal Nehru from the history of the freedom struggle. There's a chapter on the history of the freedom struggle in that, in which there is now a whole paragraph on Savarkar. There's a passing reference to Mahatma Gandhi, and Nehru has been removed. He was there, but he's been completely removed from there. You now have a situation where on his birthday, nobody can go near his statue to do anything meaningful.
In JNU as well.
I understand that some of our young friends here made an attempt today to have a small discussion in front as a mark of, paying homage. Because how do you pay homage to Nehru except by having a discussion? That's what he believed in, democracy. And they were barred by the JNU administration, would not allow students, young people, to go and do anything near the statue of Jawaharlal Nehru on this very campus. I was told that as a matter of great shame that even the lights that were there have been very conveniently, switched off, or they have suddenly, fused or whatever. And of course, this university cannot afford to buy a couple of bulbs to illuminate the statue of Jawaharlal Nehru. So that's where we are in this country, and it's for all of you young people to decide whether this is the state of things that you want to grow up in. Not that you're children, but you're still growing up, or whether you want something different. And my job here is to help you today to think about some of these issues that afflict us today and see what we could learn from Jawaharlal Nehru. The topic that I framed was the making of a secular democracy and Jawaharlal Nehru, because of course he had so much to contribute to the making of post-independence India as well as to the freedom struggle. But I thought that we could pick up these two very important ideas, secularism and democracy. And secular democracy is actually his phrase, because he very often used this phrase that India has to be a secular democracy. He used them in association with each other. In his opinion, he also used the word socialist democracy, by the way, very often, because he believed very firmly that you could not have, or you should not have, socialism without democracy. He was one of the first international critics of the Stalinist system, and much before Gorbachev and all of them came to the scene, even before Khrushchev started his criticism. Jawaharlal Nehru, right from the 1930s, when they first began to hear of the purges that happened in the Soviet Union, even though he believed in socialism as something that was necessary in order to bring about an egalitarian society and to give relief to the underprivileged, the downtrodden, yet he was very convinced that if you did it without democracy, it was going to be disastrous. And therefore he insisted that it had to be with democracy. So I'll begin with democracy because I think in many ways I believe that it was very fundamental to his thinking. And I think it fits in with our concerns today, because one of the things that we are seeing is a consistent, organized attack on democracy and democratic institutions and democratic principles all around us. And I think it would be very useful for us to look at what Nehru had to say and do about this. Okay. For Nehru, democracy and also along with democracy, civil liberties. He did not de-link the two, because there is no democracy without civil liberties for him. Civil liberties means all the freedoms of expression, of association, to form trade unions, to form groups, and the freedom of the press, which was very, very important, the freedom to profess your religion, all these which were then later embodied in the Constitution as well. So he always linked the two. Democracy is not just about having elections, a parliamentary system, representative government, a cabinet, responsible to the legislature. Those are one aspect. But along with that, you also had to have the citizens who had to be free to debate and discuss and to criticize and to be able to evolve their own understanding on the basis of this discussion and debate. How could you have discussion and debate if you did not have a free press? Where would those ideas be expressed? And of course, I'm sure you know this, that this too came out of the experience of the Indian freedom fighters during the course of the freedom struggle. Because it was the British who put curbs on civil liberties. In order to curb the freedom struggle, in order to control it, in order to keep it within limits, they always put curbs on civil liberties. Let us not imagine that British India was some democratic civil libertarian haven. There were restrictions of all kinds. Section 144 was readily used, and sedition, the famous sedition law which JNU revived in the national consciousness in 2016 with Kanhaiya and others being charged under that. By the way, the charge sheet, has it still come? No, not yet. How long is it now? 2.5 years. It has 2.5 years have passed. Is there no legal limit?
No.
No legal limit. You can take as long as you like. I see. Okay. I thought there must be some legal limit on it.
2019.
Okay. Political limit, you mean, not legal limit. Okay. Anyway, so democracy and civil liberties were something that went together in his understanding, and I want to emphasize this. He believed in them as absolute values. What does that mean? That means that they were not instrumental to something else. Very often you hear people saying, we can only achieve this if we have this. It's not that democracy and civil liberties were important because they were a means to an end. That is, in order to get socialism, we need democracy and civil liberties. No. For him, democracy and civil liberties were important in themselves. That's why I use the word absolute values. Because without those, there could be, in his opinion, there could be no civilized, existence. It was absolute necessity for a modern civilized society to exist. So he believed in these as absolute values and not only as a means of bringing about economic and social development. In fact, I will quote what his biographer S. Gopal, whom I referred to a little while ago, had said, and I quote him, that there was in Nehru, he said, a granite core. Granite is a hard rock. A granite core of intellectual and moral commitment. Please mark the words. He had not just an intellectual commitment, but also a moral commitment. It was an ethical matter for him. Moral commitment to democratic values. On a particular occasion when he was giving an interview to a man who was very famous when we were growing up. You people may not have even heard his name. There used to be a very fiery socialist newspaper, weekly newspaper called The Blitz. I don't know if you people have ever heard of it. And it had a very famous editor called R.K. Karanjia, who, he was like very, very well known those days. And it's in an interview to him, Nehru had said, I would not give up the democratic system for anything. That's how firm he was on democracy and the value of democracy. As I've already said, that he believed in freedom of thought and expression, and particularly freedom of the press. And what is very important, he believed that even the demands of public safety should not normally encroach on these freedoms. We hear very often, for reasons of security, for reasons of national security, for reasons of, the state, the liberties can be encroached upon. Whereas he believed that that must only be something that was very, very exceptional. In fact, he was the person, you're all familiar with civil liberties unions. There is the People's Union of PUDR, PUCL, etc. We are all familiar with that. Well, the first civil liberties union in India was founded by Jawaharlal Nehru during the period of the freedom struggle. And further, it was he, believing in democracy, he was the one who formulated and put forward the demand for a constituent assembly. What does that mean? An assembly, an elected assembly, which would draft the constitution. So again, that's a very democratic principle. Because earlier the model was that the British would negotiate. How did the 1909 reforms come? 1919 reforms, 1935 reforms. It would be roundtable conference held in London, or negotiations between the Viceroy and Indian leaders and British parliamentarians, and then the British would give a, like a, what shall I say, like an order, a grant. This is the form that constitutional system is going to take in India. Now, right from 1935-36, he began to talk about the need for a constituent assembly. That is, Indian people must elect a constituent assembly, their own representatives, who will formulate the constitution for India. We will not have a constitution that is given to us by the British. The 1935 Government of India Act was given to us by the British. It was an act passed in the British Parliament. But the Indian Constitution was passed in our own Constituent Assembly. And that demand was accepted in 1946. The Central Assembly, which had been elected under the British, was converted into a Constituent Assembly. And that Constituent Assembly then came out with the Constitution of India. It was not something, and the Constitution of India was an act that was enacted by India. It was not an act of the British Parliament. Right. His commitment to democracy is also shown by the fact that he treated elections, parliamentary elections, with utmost seriousness. Do recall the period when we got our independence, 1947. Independence and partition occur simultaneously, right? It's a single act. India gets independence and India is partitioned. Immediately, even before partition, the communal riots had started, beginning with August killings of Calcutta 1946, March, Punjab, and then before that Bihar, North Delhi. Already situation was very bad. But the moment partition was announced, a new wave of communal rioting, which was now the refugees who were desperate. On both sides, people had to literally run. That led to an absolutely dangerous situation developing in India. And it took quite a while to handle this situation. I'll come to it when I'm talking about secularism, how that was done. And then Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated within 5 months of independence. 47 August is independence, January 1948 is the murder of Mahatma Gandhi, which then leads to various other. Now imagine that situation. It was a situation in which, with great justification, the Prime Minister or the government would have said, we are surrounded by chaos. And mind you, there was economic crisis because the crops had been destroyed with all that refugee problem. There was food shortage. We were in very, very bad shape economically. There were many reasons that could be given for saying, this is not the time that we can have elections. Let's wait for 2 years to have elections. Let's give it a little gap. But Nehru could not wait. He was desperate. When the constitution is passed in January 1950, he wants that the election should be held as fast as possible. And when he is told by those who have to organize the elections, the election commissioner, the whole, imagine this is the first general elections. And under adult franchise, the Indian constitution gave adult franchise to the people of India. Before that, only 13% of the people used to be eligible to vote. So it is a massive increase in those who would now be voting. So the entire system and structure of elections had to be set up from. They said it will take us time. We have to prepare the voters list. We have to do this. We have to organize. It's all de novo. And he was very angry and very upset that they were taking so much time. Even then, within a year and a half, elections were held. By the end of 1951, the first general elections were held. Despite all that, the energy which had to be spent on settling the refugees and solving the basic economic problems, yet he was so convinced that the only way, because he had this conviction that you have to carry people with you for whatever be the crisis. And I will give you the example of how right he was. was that this communal onslaught that we are facing at the time and as a consequence of the partition, which is threatening to engulf the whole country, of course, force had to be used in order to suppress. The law had to be used. After Gandhiji's assassination, for example, the RSS was banned. Patel as Home Minister and Nehru as Prime Minister banned the RSS. They put 25,000 RSS workers in jail where they were, and they remained there for a good 1.5 years. Despite many apologies and many efforts at wanting to come out and all that. But he knew that ultimately the answer to the communal poison that is being spread is not suppression. Suppression is only something you use in the spur of the moment when you have no other recourse, in order to stop people, when they are going mad. But after that, it has to be persuasion. It has to be ideological engagement. People have to be convinced that what is happening was wrong. You cannot stop communalism through suppression, through counter-violence, in the long run. Short run, yes, there's a riot, you have to use the violence. There's no other way. So that's why he was desperately in a hurry. And he was so confident of not just himself, but of the whole legacy of the freedom struggle, that he was convinced that if we went to the people, if we only could get the people to express their opinion, the right side would win. And I will give you a few figures to show you how right his instinct was. Now, in this first election campaign, because I think you can't talk about Nehru as a Democrat without talking a little bit about what this election campaign or these general elections were all about. In this election campaign, the first election campaign, general elections, Nehru himself travelled some 25,000 miles in the campaign, and he addressed in all about 35 million people personally in public meetings, face to face, or a tenth of India's population. Now you have helicopters and so many other means of communication and whatnot. We are talking of a very different time. The scale was just phenomenal. Over 1 million officials were involved in handling the elections. That was the scale of this enterprise. 1 million officials. 173 million voters were registered through a house-to-house survey. There were no electoral rolls readily available. 3/4 of those who were eligible were illiterate. Okay? So 3/4 of your voters were illiterate. Imagine having to handle a campaign in that kind of a situation. The elections were spread out over 6 months. Now, when they are spread out over, 20 days or 30 days or whatever, because of security issues, we get so perturbed. And candidates of some 77 political parties. Because first elections, everybody wanted to take their chance. Who knows what will happen? Apart from some independents, contested in some 3,772 constituencies. And the miracle was that everybody, including many foreign observers who came to see this miracle of a poverty-stricken, illiterate population having adult franchise going to vote, they all said that it was a very fair election, that they were genuinely free and fair elections. It was a fantastic achievement. In fact, a British newspaper, the Manchester Guardian, wrote in its editorial that the Working Committee of the Indian National Congress can draw pleasure from the extraordinary demonstration which India has given. If ever a country took a leap in the dark towards democracy, it was India. Contemplating these facts, the Congress Working Committee may well purr with satisfaction. And what was the result of these elections? This is after you've had 2 or 3 years of not just the spread of communal virus, but actual communal violence in so many parts of the country. And you know, the estimates are that somewhere around 600,000 to maybe 1 million people may have lost their lives. Another few million changed over from one side to the other. I mean, they're just, the estimates of the people affected by the partition are quite mind-boggling. And even today, you know, we do not really have very correct estimates. These are all, you could say, guesstimates more than really very good estimates. It could be much worse. But the result was that the communal forces, the Hindu communal forces, which at that time it was the Jansangh, and there was another small party called the Raj Parishad, essentially those. They got only 10 seats out of 489. And the Congress got 364. And in terms of the percentage of the vote, they got only 6% of the vote. Okay? This was the humiliating defeat that they had to face at a time when they had gone crazy with the cry of Hindu Rashtra. If Pakistan has been formed as a country for the Muslims, then India must be a country for the Hindus. That was the slogan. We have to establish a Hindu Rashtra. That was the call. Rejecting the flag, national flag, flying the Bhagwa Jhanda and all that, you know, in a very big way. But the answer through elections, in which the poorest of the people were involved, was something that they could not argue with. So the real defeat of the communal forces comes with the elections of 1951-52. With what face could they now come before the people and speak and say that we have supporters among the Hindus? After all, you know, when you get this kind of a humiliating defeat, you can't really say anything. The other thing was, they could also not say that this election was not fought on this issue. That, you know, people voted for Nehru because of this promise he gave them that he will, you know, this concession or that concession, or he will put so many lakhs into their bank accounts and things like that. Well, actually, the fact of the matter is that Nehru made it a single issue election. He deliberately made it into a single issue election. Wherever he went, he said, this battle, this election is about nothing else but the soul of India. Are we going to be a secular nation, or are we going to be a Hindu Rashtra? This is the fight we are fighting. So there was no ambiguity. You could not say that people didn't know what they were voting about. So there was nothing else that he talked about. All those 25,000 miles that he travelled and the 35 million people that he addressed, everywhere that he went, you know, and others who read his speeches and heard about what he was saying, he made it very clear that this is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about anything else. I'm not talking about economic development. I'm not talking about 5-year plans. All that will happen. Because if the character of India, if the secular character of India is destroyed, then it's his understanding everything else goes. All that can happen only after you have secured the basics. And the basic was that this had to be a secular democracy. Democracy is securing through the elections. And secularism through what he is fighting for in the elections. Okay. But please don't get the impression that when I'm saying Nehru all the time, this is a battle that he's fighting as an individual. I'm talking about Nehru today, it's his birthday, and we're talking particularly about his contribution. He could never have done this if he did not have the support of the entire galaxy of the leadership of the freedom struggle with him. It's not a one-man effort, and I will come to how he did not believe in one-man efforts at all. In his understanding, democracy was necessary for keeping India united as a nation, because given its diversity, it could only be held together by a non-violent democratic way of life and not by force or coercion. This was also an article of faith. You could not, it was not only that you should not, you could not hold India together through force or coercion. You could only hold it together if people voluntarily wanted to be. And that could only be if you provided them a democratic structure in ways, an opportunity and a space for them to express their grievances. You know, it's like a pressure cooker which has the, what do you call it?
Safety valve.
The safety, the valve. You know, so whenever the pressure is getting built up, if you do not allow it to express, then one day the pressure cooker is going to burst, as happened in the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was destroyed overnight. It was not just socialism which was destroyed. It was the whole country was broken apart. Because there was no opportunity for people to continuously express how they felt about these things, you know. The advantage of a democracy, one, is that not everybody gets angry at the same time. So when Tamil Nadu is angry, Punjab is okay. When Punjab gets angry, Mizoram is fine. Mizoram gets angry, Manipur says it's okay, you know. So the pressure cooker keeps letting off steam, you know. So a democratic system, as he understood it, was also very important because this country is so diverse, linguistically, culturally, social structure-wise. You have tribes, you have castes, you have every possible variety that you can think of. Okay. The other thing, therefore, what he said was, and I'm quoting him here, he said, this is too large a country with too many legitimate diversities. Mark the words. Legitimate diversities, you know, so diversity is not something that you can say there is something wrong. They are legitimate. To permit any so-called, within quotes, strong man to trample over people and their ideas. Okay? So we don't have, you know, people with broad chests and all that. You don't need strong men. Strong men can't manage this country. It's too diverse, too much diversity. Only a democratic leader can manage this country. So that was part of the commitment to democracy and the necessity of democracy, which he was constantly explaining. Because anything where you try to put people down, where you try to consolidate too much power in one person or in one group, leads to trouble, because then others do not have the opportunity to express their diversities. One other aspect of his commitment to democracy was that he showed great respect for Parliament. No, and I think this is important today to me, because Parliament, his respect for Parliament was an aspect of his respect for institutions. And one of the things we are seeing today is the destruction of institutions. The lack of understanding that institutions are crucial. Whether it's the courts, whether it's the Supreme Court and its dignity, whether it's the Reserve Bank, whether it's universities, whether it's Lalit Kala Academy, you know, or the Planning Commission. You do not run a country through the government and government fiat. Country is a very complex phenomenon, you know. Ruling is itself a very complex phenomenon. And if you destroy the institutions, then how is the system going to run? You're actually going to, the whole edifice will fall. And this is what Nehru showed through his example. The way he would sit in Parliament through long, boring sessions, whether anybody sat or did not sit, the Prime Minister of India would attend as many Parliament sessions as he could from morning till night. Now, if the Prime Minister is sitting, everybody else will have to sit. How does a junior member say, "Main to thak gaya, lunch khane jana hai"? You know? If the Prime Minister is continuing to sit there till late. Not only that, the respect he showed by taking everything that was happening in the Parliament seriously, by debating, by discussing. He built up the dignity and the respect of the Parliament by investing himself into that institution. Okay. And in fact, during this period, one very interesting thing, a very large number of private member bills or non-official bills were introduced in the Parliament and were passed. This is very interesting because here is what gives you the non-government people a sense of participation in the process. Even if I have a majority, it doesn't mean that I control everything. If you come up with a good idea, if you come up with a private member's bill that is a good one, yeah, we'll pass it. I think after many years I have heard Shashi Tharoor putting forward a private member's bill. But it's an institution that just sort of disappeared because it is assumed that it's only the government that brings forward legislation, because then with your majority you push it through. But the idea that legislation is, and this is about bringing in things which are worthwhile, and if they are good, even if you're not from the ruling party, it will be accepted. That idea of Parliament was something that Nehru tried to inculcate. And in fact, even during the last few months of his life, when he was very ill, he would not miss any session and would even insist on rising to his feet whenever he had to speak in order to maintain the decorum of the House. He also institutionalized the functioning of the cabinet system of government. You know, we have a cabinet now also. I think a very large number of the members of that cabinet, I don't know their names, honestly. Because they just don't get that kind of importance. Everything is put forward in the name of just a few people. 1, 2, 3, Arun Shourie says 1.5. And he asked you to guess which is the half. Not the one that you think. But what I mean is, what I'm trying to say, here we have cabinet ministers who worked with Nehru in their memoirs have told us about how they functioned in the cabinet and how even those who were not people with great public, popular support like leaders and things like that, but people who had been even taken in for their intellectual capacities, etc., would be treated with great respect and everybody's opinion mattered, and Nehru would not ordinarily interfere in the working of a ministry. No, it was the minister who had complete charge and complete control. I don't know about others, but I know another Prime Minister who was known for this was Manmohan Singh. Maybe because he had been long experience in government, being a good bureaucrat himself, he understood how these things are supposed to actually function. And before I move on to other things, just one or two nice quotations about the way in which he thought. See, I have read this so often in different kinds of ways. Democracy is about how you think, a manner of action, a manner of behavior to your neighbor and to your adversary and opponent.
That is what will define whether you're a true democrat or not. Do you treat even your opponent's opinion with respect and give it a solid hearing and try to learn from it? Then you are democratic. Democratic is not just paying lip service, having big rallies, garnering votes through whichever means possible by appealing to people's basest emotions or giving them monetary or other promises. That is not democracy. That is only winning elections and may not be in the best form possible. But democracy is much more, and that is what he practiced. He genuinely respected his adversaries and opponents. And this is something, people today in power can't understand. When they keep talking about differences between Nehru and Patel, differences between Nehru and Bose, they cannot understand that having differences and yet respecting your, not even rival, not even opponent, but people with whom you differ, is something that was not just a peculiarity of one leader of the freedom struggle. As I often say, if they did not do that, we would not be independent. If you could not have got independence for this huge country by one person being a great democrat. You had to actually practice democratic functioning within the party, within the leadership, for this movement to have gone forward. You had to give space to Prakasam from Andhra Pradesh. Otherwise, why were the Andhras going to come with you? You had to recognize a Kelappan in Kerala, a Bordoloi in Assam, a Mehtab in Odisha. And not just like that. They had to have space for themselves, for their ideas, for their needs, for the aspirations of their people. You had to understand that for the Odiyas, for example, in the 1920s, they did not come wholeheartedly into the freedom struggle till the Congress accepted that Odisha must be a separate state, because they had been merged with Bihar after the partition of Bengal in 1911. And they had an aspiration to be a separate state. They had a sense that they were suppressed by the Bengali language, and they would not come into the freedom struggle once that was recognized. So that is a particular problem of one particular province. Another province would have another kind of issues along with the aspiration for freedom. That's what I'm saying, the diversity. The tribal peoples would have different kinds of aspirations. And how do you function a huge movement which has to throw out the British, bringing in all these people into it, unless you accommodate their genuine needs, desires, their flavor, their cultural flavor. Unless you bring that into it, when they come to attend a session of the All India Congress, suppose they find that everywhere it is dominated by UP. How long will they come? They'll say, why should I go there? That's not my cultural, I don't feel comfortable there. So in every way, the movement had to recognize and accommodate, both at the grassroots level, both at the demands level, as well as at the leadership level, this enormous diversity. And you could only do that if you genuinely functioned in a democratic framework. And that's what Nehru is saying. That democracy is about how you think, how you act, how you function. It's your manner of functioning vis-a-vis not just your neighbor, but also your adversary and your opponent. So he could disagree with Mahatma Gandhi. He writes his autobiography. Half the book is a critique of Mahatma Gandhi. But he never left Mahatma Gandhi. Right? So this is, in practice, you can see how you can disagree and respect and work together. Because the cause is the larger cause of the freedom. And you need not agree in order to respect or even to follow. He followed Mahatma Gandhi and yet he constantly critiqued him. This complexity, okay? This complexity they taught the leadership of India's freedom struggle, taught to the Indian people, not through their lectures, but through their actual functioning. Subhash Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru could disagree, they could agree on a lot of things. They fought the battle for socialism together. They formed the youth leagues together. They were youth leaders, both of them. And then when Subhash Bose had a big disagreement with Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru had a lot of sympathy for him, but Nehru did not go with him. There were many complex reasons for that. But when Subhash Bose writes to him, he was ill and he was in a hill station in Bihar. He writes to Nehru, this is 38, and says, you please come and see me. I have to talk to you. And Nehru is going to Calcutta. He says, I can't say no to you. This is when they are in the midst of a big argument and when Nehru has just received a 10 or 12 page long letter from Subhash Bose, in which Subhash Bose has called him all kinds of names. You are like this, you are weak, you never take a stand. When it comes to the crunch, you are never able to do this, you are not coming with us. He criticizes him heavily, long letter. And what does Nehru say to that? He replies to that and says, I think you're right. I am like, what do you do to a man who has so little sense of ego that he takes such harsh criticism from a man much younger than him, who's not as tall a leader as he is. He takes it and he says, yes, I am like that. And then Subhash Bose said, you have to come and see me, I can't come. And he breaks his journey and goes all the way to this hill station to go and meet Bose. And again argue and talk. But he goes all the way. Their personal relationship never suffered through this whole. I'm only giving you a few examples. Okay, please somebody tell me the time. Because you can get carried away. Huh? 9? 10:45. Okay, just give me a minute. I will realize it. His reaction was very interesting. I'm quoting him. He says, we as a government, whether at the center or in the provinces, have no desire to continue governing people who do not want us. Ultimately, people should have the type of government they want, whether it is good or bad. And this is a letter he writes to the then acting Chief Minister of Bengal, N.R. Sarkar. Okay. Colonial rule in Africa was Ghana, under the leadership of a famous leader called Nkrumah. And as in many other African countries, the popular movements very soon became one-party governments. That is why also what happened in India was a very exceptional achievement. That someone like Nehru was so popular, did not convert the democratic mandate that he had into a one-party rule and a one-man government. It was quite exceptional. It happened in very many countries. So in Ghana, what was happening was that Nkrumah started to promote a personality cult of himself. And around that time, the two of them met. And this is recorded by Vijayalakshmi Pandit in her book. The first thing that Nehru said to him, to Nkrumah, was, see, what had happened was that Nkrumah had got stamps issued with his own photograph on the stamps. So when he met him, he said, what the hell do you mean by putting your head on a stamp? This was very odd thing. The two leaders are meeting, and this was their first meeting. But as a senior sort of statesman, leader of the anti-colonial struggles, most of the African countries had actually a few years, even a decade or more behind, and had a great respect for the Indian freedom struggle and the Indian leadership. So he very frankly turned around and told him, Why are you doing this? Why are you putting your own head on a stand? This is not the way you're supposed to function. Anyway, so since we have very little time, I'll not refer to the text at all because that takes more time. But just to talk about the Nehru's understanding of and his actual practice and success in countering communalism and promoting a secular movement first and then a secular state and a secular society in India after independence. So I just made broad points. One, I want to emphasize that before independence, when communalism started to grow in India, this was really the 1920s, when we first find communalism beginning to take on a mass form. Before that, it was British were trying to promote it, but it was still a very insignificant phenomenon. It was after the end of the non-cooperation movement in 1922, this period in between, when the first elections are held under the diarchy system of government, and in my understanding, they promoted this communalism, but I'm not going into that. It came up. And the first political leader, intellectual, first anybody in India who began to understand and explain and write about communalism, what it was, analyze it, point out its dangers, was Jawaharlal Nehru. So we owe a great debt to Nehru in terms of being able to understand what communalism is all about. He was the person who formulated that if fascism ever comes to India, it will come in the form of communalism. And we are seeing that playing out in front of our eyes. But this was pre-silent. He said it in the 1950s. When communalism in India started to take on a fascist character from 1937 onwards, both Hindu and Muslim communalism. The Muslim League started to become rabid. The Hindu communalism also, which was more moderate earlier, under the Hindu Mahasabha leadership, and Savarkar took over the leadership of Hindu Mahasabha in 1937. Both Hindu and Muslim communalism started to become fascistic. What is fascistic? Based on populist, based on hate, based on populist mobilization, using crowds, using violence, suppressing dissent, using religion, using emotive, identity-based ideas. That he was the person before the scholars came to analyze it. It was Jawaharlal Nehru who gave the first scholarly and political explanations of communism. And I think that itself is a fantastic contribution for anybody to have made, because it was original. There was nothing there like a copybook for him, which he could base himself on. He is analyzing the practice, what he's seeing in front of his eyes. He is theoretically understanding and explaining to the people and pointing out the dangers of what is coming on. So to understand it, to analyze it, to foresee the danger that it could pose, I think there we have to first and foremost give Nehru the credit for that. Secondly, he was, what shall I say, what's the right word to use? He was uncompromising in his opposition to communalism. And he was uncompromising in his commitment to secularism. Just as he was uncompromising in his commitment to democracy, he was uncompromising in his commitment to secularism. There was nothing that would make him give up secularism. There was nothing that would make him give up his opposition to communalism. And we see this in its most vivid form in the years from 1946 till 1949, 50, till the first general elections, that period. But especially 47, 46, 47, 48, these are the worst years of communal tension, communal violence. We see his actual actions, and they are something fantastic. Today, when we see what's happening around us, it is so inspiring and so comforting to even go back and read about those times, though they were much worse times in terms of the violence and the number of people killed and all. But what was reassuring was the behavior of the leadership. In much, much worse situations, the way they stood up to that, they did not get swayed by it. It was not that people are moving in one direction, therefore leadership also gets swayed and starts moving because they want to somehow keep the people's affections on their side. So right from 1946, and I'll give you 2 or 3 quick examples. In 1946, August, as I said, mass communal violence is set off in Bengal, Calcutta. Muslim League gives a call, Jinnah gives a call for direct action. 5,000 people die in a matter of 2 or 3 days, almost equal number of casualties on both sides. Then the reaction to that starts in Noakhali, which is a remote district in Bengal on the one hand and Bihar on the other. Almost at the same time, and by end of October, there is mass violence. This is all a new phenomenon because more or less in India, till then, communal violence had been an urban phenomenon. It happened in the towns and the cities. Rural areas were away from it. For the first time in 1946, rural Bihar explodes, rural Bengal explodes. So this is a new stage of communalism, where it has reached the villages. Obviously, as you can see, much more difficult to control. Town is something you bring in a lot of police, army, this, that. Within a few days, if you have the determination, you can bring the situation under control. Here it is all spread out. I won't tell you the Noakhali story because that's Gandhi's story. We'll keep it for another day. But I'm sure you've heard about it, what great role he played in handling the situation in a Muslim majority area in Noakhali where things were really bad. I'll just talk about Nehru's story, which was vis-a-vis Bihar. In Bihar, there was a Congress government, a provincial Congress government in place because 1945-46 elections had taken place under the Provincial Autonomy Act and a Congress government was there. So, and in the center, the interim government was there, of which Nehru was the head. So they had some political power in their hand, and in the province also they had some political power in their hand, though governor was there. Immediately on hearing that in Bihar communal violence has started and that it is spreading to the villages, you will find this difficult to believe, Nehru took his entire cabinet, central cabinet, and descended on Patna. And he made the entire Bihar leadership also to go with him. And they spread out into these rural areas. There were 2 or 3 districts. And those were very big districts, old districts which were equal to 4 or 5 districts of today. Where they spread out in all these areas and of course used force also, used police also, used all the coercion that they could use. But along with that and along with Congress workers, they spread out into all these areas and went and held meetings, rallies, going into the rural areas, going into villages, talking to people, telling them that what you're doing is wrong. And Nehru, in his typical fashion, he would threaten people. If you don't listen, then we will do this to you. But I appeal to you in the name of Mahatma Gandhi, I appeal to you in the name of this. If you kill a Muslim, you will first have to kill me. It will be over my dead body. I mean, those speeches of Nehru's, if you read today, they are something unbelievable. That the Prime Minister, he was then equal to the Prime Minister of India, could be going and, along with the entire cabinet, he even persuaded the Muslim League member of the cabinet to go with him to Bihar to curb the violence over there. And would you believe it that in a rural area, which was a huge area at that time, this was the last week of October, by the end of the first week of November, they had brought the situation completely under control. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. With the kind of means of communication that you had at that time, with, and it was just something that was a Herculean task. It could only be done if they had complete political will and the determination that every possible method, they even threatened that they will use planes and whatnot, to suppress if you don't listen. And beginning with the Bihar, they brought the situation under control in Bihar. And the same story is repeated when the partition actually takes place. From, in fact, even a day or two before independence, because, the Radcliffe Award was given 3 days before independence. You know what is the Radcliffe Award, which actually demarcated the boundary between India and Pakistan on the western side. And people didn't notice 3 days before independence whether they were going to be on the Indian side of the border or the Pakistani side of the border. And when they realized where they were and if they were on the wrong side, then, as you know, and that was one reason why such a massacre occurred, because the whole thing was done so badly. But I'm not talking about responsibility for partition today and the British culpability, etc. I'm only talking about how Nehru and the cabinet and the government functioned at that time. He immediately called up Liaquat Ali Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and said, we must tour Punjab together. That is the Pakistani Punjab and the Indian Punjab. And Liaquat Ali Khan also agreed. And when, even before independence, he went, and immediately after the formal ceremonies and all that were over, of the handing over, Tryst with Destiny speech, which you have all heard, next day he is in Punjab. And what are they doing? They are going from place to place, from small town to small town, here, there, on the Pakistani side, on this side, telling the people, and organizing, right from the details of what you need, tents, this, organizing for the refugees, seeing that the violence is stopped, seeing that the proper police forces, because what the British had done was, the officers had run away. Army commandant in charge of a whole district left his unit and goes off. And this happened in district after district. District officer goes off without handing over charge to anyone. So it was a completely chaotic situation. I have calculated that if you take the first 2 months of independent India independent rule, that is when India had just been born and Nehru was the Prime Minister and they had to handle. Imagine a new country, you don't even have experience of 1 day, in running the place. He was more out in Punjab, what is now Haryana also, it was all Punjab at that time, all the border areas, than he was in Delhi. Every day, for every second day, third day he's going. When he comes back to Delhi also, he's only trying to control the communal situation. He's talking, giving long speech on All India Radio, he's going there. And there are stories which are, these are details of accounts of that time. Jamia Millia, for example, one evening faced a threat. The surrounding local population were planning to attack the university. And Mujib has written about this, who was the Vice Chancellor. They sent a message to Jawaharlal Nehru that the university is under threat. And Nehru was living in Delhi at that time as Prime Minister. What does he do? Not only does he see to it that forces are sent to protect and all, he himself rushes to Jamia. And he sits there virtually the whole night, out in the open, with the residents of Jamia, till the danger is completed. He sits there at night, on the ground. क्या होगा देखते हैं कौन आएगा. There are examples we have of him getting out of his car and rushing into the crowd in the middle of Connaught Place and threatening to beat people up because they are indulging in communal violence. In Delhi, riots started on the 5th of September, first week of September. Mind you, only 20 days after independence. Just think about it, it's a new government. It hasn't even got itself in place, you know. And the threat was that there were something like 2 lakh Muslims who were living in the city. And these were refugees who had come. And RSS and other such organizations were all promoting these riots, you know. So they were basically trying to throw out the Muslims from their homes so that they could occupy the homes. They had been thrown out of their homes. Now they are coming here and saying, you get out, we'll occupy your homes. And what happens is, they actually they did a Herculean job. Within a matter of 2 days, 2 lakh Muslims are evacuated from the center of Delhi and kept safely in refugee camps in Purana Killa and surrounding areas of Delhi. And they said that within a matter of 2 weeks, they made Delhi so safe that Muslims could walk around in the city without fear of being hurt. And in another little while, they could get the Muslims back into their houses. You people went to Mewat, the Mewat story, you know. That's part of this story. It's the same period when the Mewatis are threatened. And the kind of reassurance which Gandhiji and others give them, that no, you belong here, we will not allow you to leave. You know, that's the kind of atmosphere it was in. So that whole period. And then of course, they managed to get the situation under control. There is a severe threat that it will spread over the whole of North India. And this is the period in which Nehru is very clear. And if you read his speeches and letters at this time, he repeatedly says, we are facing a fascist threat. What is happening is not just violence or chaos by refugees and other disgruntled and unhappy people. These are organized gangs. He repeatedly calls the RSS as to be behind this in clear-cut terms and says it is a fascist organization, it is a terrorist organization which is trying to capture the Indian state. When Gandhiji is assassinated, the statement which Nehru makes, he said at that time, which he writes to the chief ministers and others, is, he says, this was not meant to be a one-shot affair. It was the first in a planned series of assassinations of leaders in order to completely destabilize the new found government and to thereby overthrow the government in the heat of the whole post-partition communal sentiments which the people were then a victim of. So he was absolutely, what I find fascinating is that there was no woolly-headedness about him at all. He is very clear what he is facing and where the threat is coming from. And therefore, when Gandhiji is assassinated, before that you can ask, why do they not take a firm stand? Why do they not ban the RSS before that? There we come back to democracy. A new born state priding itself on having fought a democratic, non-violent war against the British. The first thing that if it starts doing is banning organizations, what kind of a reputation will they get? It's only Gandhiji's assassination that enabled them, that provided the opportunity to take such a strong action. Even then, they were never comfortable with it. Because basically they believe that you must not counter through force except when necessary and for some time. Ultimately, you have to counter through ideological combat, not through that. And therefore, after 1.5 years, they did remove the ban and allow the RSS to function again. Of course, on the basis of an undertaking that they would no longer take part in politics and that there would be a cultural organization. And even today, that is the basis on which they are supposed to be functioning. But that is a written undertaking which they are given, which, by the way, today I found in recent weeks, I had never heard them denying it earlier. But in recent weeks, I am seeing them denying it and saying that no, we have never given such an undertaking. I have read it in the last few weeks. I am seeing 2-3 weeks. I am seeing these statements coming saying that no, we never gave such an undertaking, which is not correct at all. And they are citing, now I remember, they are citing a reply given by somebody in the Bombay Legislative Council a year later to a question that was it a conditional release? Now that may be a technical word, you see. That in the release document, was it said that it is conditional? No, maybe not. So they are going by that and saying that the reply was no. Therefore, we never gave any undertaking. Now that is again typical double speak, which we are very familiar with of these organizations. So anyway, the basic point which I wanted to make, and I think I have made that sufficiently, is how during the gravest of threats, in very, very difficult circumstances, the commitment to the secular ideal, the faith in the secular ideal, that no matter how difficult it looked, was never given up. The answer was, the long-term answer was the general elections of 1951-52 and the resounding defeat which the communal forces were given in that. And the proof of that defeat is, and that they understood it, is also that for 10 years after that, there was no communal violent incident anywhere in the country. It's a good 10 years later that again they start to, get active, and that's a different story which we can't go into now. But of course, in that the huge contribution also was of the martyrdom of Mahatma Gandhi. Because with his martyrdom, there came about a sense of enormous guilt among a lot of Hindus who, even though they had not become completely swayed by the RSS type communal propaganda, had somewhere become a little sympathetic because of the whole impact of the partition, Pakistan for Muslims, India for Hindus, etc., etc. Even when they had become partially listening to it with sympathy, they felt as if they had participated somewhere in the assassination of the Mahatma. That they were also guilty because they had to some extent fallen victim to that ideology which killed him. And this led to a great revulsion, a great sense of guilt and a kind of catharsis, which I think proved to be a very strong antidote to the communal propaganda for the next, 10 years or so. So I'll end.